Hi everyone, welcome to a new episode of the AI Best Business Show. اليوم on the show I have with me Elise Kav. He's one of the entrepreneurs I really had my eye on 2 months ago. He's working in an ecosystem or industry that I'm really interested about, and it's the agriculture industry. Eli, first, welcome on the show.
Thanks, Ahmed. Appreciate it.
Eli, introduce yourself in 1 to 2 minutes before we jump into what we're going to talk about for this episode.
Wow, I don't think I ever had to do that. Usually when I'm pitching, I introduce myself for 5 minutes. And I guess I can say that I'm a 36-year-old Lebanese Canadian. Grew up in the UAE. Blessed to have worked with amazing people, amazing companies, and I've embarked on an entrepreneurship journey. My second officially, one was a personal project that I did, and this is my second one, and obviously much larger. Super happy with this journey. It's been so rewarding in so many ways, right? And especially when you're doing something that you're passionate about, like the AgTech space. It just adds to the excitement. So here we are. I'm leading Right Farm along with some amazing people, and super happy to be here and talk to you, Ahmed.
I love that. Eli, before we jump into Right Farm, I want to speak. I have a question that always pop on my mind. In the region, as a MENA region, we have one of the best lands, considered the best lands for farming. And still through that, I think we face food security. We don't know where we're going to get our wheat from, our daily fresh products from. Why is that? And where does the problem come from? And what solution do you see?
That's a great question. I think the overarching sort of issue here is the lack of access to data and sort of, especially when it comes to such a traditional, messy and inefficient sort of supply chain, right? And I think it has a lot to do with digitization of the supply chain, but also the lack of access to data on especially on the farmer side, right? I always give this example. If you reach out to a farmer here in the UAE and ask what is the demand for, I don't know, whatever, parsley, let's say, right? Or this type of parsley for the market, they have no idea, right? Even if tomatoes, they have no idea. They just know that they can sell 2 tons of tomatoes a day to people that drop by in a van to the farm and pay cash for it, right? And that's why you see a lot of farms here in the UAE, for example, growing tomatoes and cucumbers because they know that is going to be sold no matter what, right? There's nothing strategic or planned. I'm generalizing, obviously. There are a lot of people out there that know exactly what they're doing, right? But I mean, from a traditional landscape, there are 2 things that you can equip the supply side or farmers with that will be a huge game changer. 1 is data, and 2 is technology, right? And it's great to see now that governments, especially in the UAE, have been at the forefront of tech enablement and sort of trying to pay attention to that exact problem, right? How can we sort of boost the agriculture sector, and how can we empower farmers? And it all starts with tech and data. I consider that to be the biggest problem.
Okay, so it's the lack of data that farmers have to expect the demand and to work better on what they need to supply. And that takes me to
what to grow, when, and how much.
Okay, that takes me to another question that's related. We saw now the war between Ukraine and Russia. Not speaking about politics, but we saw that most countries, because Russia and Ukraine are both considered one of the countries that supplied most of the world with their wheat supply, and we saw that the supply chain is kind of broken. Countries are suffering, they're panicking. Egypt, one of the biggest countries, had a huge problem getting their wheat. Where is that problem coming from? Why are we so dependent on 2 countries and not starting to depend locally?
Well, a few reasons, I guess. I'm not really sure about the Egypt situation, but take the GCC countries as an example, right? Wheat just doesn't grow here, so it
Right.
has to be imported from somewhere. And obviously, this game is an economies of scale game, right? The bigger your production, the lower your price is, and I think that's a major reason why Ukraine and Russia are big exporters of wheat.
Okay.
But yeah, you're always going to find that. And again, going back to food security, the more you are mindful and the more you are aware of the need to sort of make sure that your supply chain is uninterrupted, whatever way that means. It could be, digitization, it could be whatever the
Right.
case may be, right? The more aware you are, and I think the pandemic came along and sort of gave us all a reality check, and now it happens that Ukraine and Russia are at war, and they're the biggest exporters of wheat, right? But I think it has been neglected for a long time. Not sure why, to be honest, but
What
we needed
solution?
a wake up call.
What solution? Like since now we got the wake up call, what solutions do you think we could have around this?
Boosting local production wherever possible.
Okay.
And that could be in so many ways, and then also making sure that your supply chain for imports is very solid, and you have maybe multiple avenues of supply if something breaks down somewhere, right? So
Okay.
it could be that, hey, I'm Egypt, and I'm reliant on Ukraine for all of my wheat. Wait a second, that sounds risky, right? This is business 101, right? You
Right.
can't leave all your eggs in one basket. So yeah, diversifying could be another.
I think from here, my second question would be, what types of farming do we have in the UAE or GCC countries or MENA region in general, from what you know and what you have an idea about?
Yeah. You have all types, right? You have your traditional soil and sunlight based. You have your organic, you have your greenhouse, you have your hydroponic greenhouse, vertical hydroponic farms, indoor farms, container farms. I think mother farms used to do containers. I believe they stopped doing that, and I understand why. But I think you have all types, yeah, all types of stuff. And now it's go ahead,
Go ahead. Go ahead. I'm sorry. No, I was
No,
gonna
I'm
ask.
saying now you're starting to see farmers growing pineapple here, figs,
Okay.
etc. And that's due to that sort of technology enablement, right?
I was gonna ask, what are your two favorite type of farmings that you think farmers should go towards more and more?
I'm a bit biased, so my answer is going to be biased. I was working on a vertical farming project and trying to raise money for that, so I'm
And
pretty
can
much
you explain
biased
what
towards vertical.
can you explain what vertical farming is for someone who is new to the space and listening to us?
Yeah, sure. So vertical farming is just like just like the name, right? So you're stacking crops on top of each other. And
Okay.
typically, those are crops that don't grow on trees. So your leafy greens, you find a lot of those. Your microgreens, etc. And the process of vertical farming is basically completely indoor,
Okay.
controlled environment. They call it controlled environment vertical agriculture. So you're making use of the space or maximizing the utility of the space via stacking growing modules vertically, and also you're completely controlling the environment from a temperature level, humidity level, and you use LEDs instead of sunlight. So you get the
Okay.
exact level of sort of green light ratio versus red light or white light ratio for just the whole operation is to optimize the environment around that plant for it to grow in its most optimal way, right? And there's an element of hydroponic growing as well. And hydroponic growing is essentially growing crops in a water medium and not
Okay.
in soil. Yeah.
And how does the cost differ from regular farming or traditional farming as farmers do it? Like, is the cost higher? Is the cost lower?
Yeah.
Could this be a solution for most of the problems we have around us?
Not yet. So the cost is higher. Well, the price
Okay.
is higher because the cost of farming that produce is higher, right? You're paying
Okay.
electricity bills on on LEDs. You're renting a warehouse, you're equipping that warehouse, etc. So the cost on you as a farmer goes up, and so your price goes up. But that's now, right? In a few years' time, that cost is going to go down. So the technology is still in a very nascent phase. Initially, why they explored vertical farming and then didn't go with it was because commercially it wasn't feasible. LED lights were super expensive and not very efficient, right?
Okay.
But in the past 5 years, LED lighting has taken a huge step forward from a tech perspective, and so costs dropped. And that's why now it's a bit more commercially feasible to operate a vertical farm, right? And that journey is going to continue. It's always going to be more cost efficient, eventually leading to a price point that's very similar to traditional farming.
Right. And the reason I'm really interested to hear that explanation you gave about vertical farming is 2 years ago I went down this rabbit hole of looking about, especially when COVID started and we just sat at home, and I started seeing a bunch of venture capitalists and a bunch of investors invest in the space, but no startup really going out and being the next unicorn as we know it. So I was wondering why, because I know there's a hefty cost you have to put in before you launch a vertical farm, and you have to figure out your logistics. And what I like about vertical farms is you could be in New York where there's just buildings around you and you're having a vertical farm that's in-house and supplying it. And then I thought about the GCC countries where you have desert for most of the places and it's hard to grow stuff. Well, I'm like, and even Egypt, well, I'm like, okay, well, let's put a vertical farm in one of these countries and supply the region with it. And that's why I'm really interested about the space, and I hope we could see a unicorn in the space. Because
Pure Harvest is on its way.
Okay.
Pure Harvest is one of those that's on their way. They just got 180 million, I believe.
Oh wow!
I forget what funding round. Yeah, that is. I mean, if you look at even Pure Harvest, when they started, they got government money, right?
Okay.
The investment office was an investor, and I think the primary one. And I think private investment in the States, there's no real trouble in raising money for agtech and especially for vertical farming. Here, I think it's picking up right now. So Red Sea Farms in Saudi just got some private funding. So it's just a matter of time. I think when we were, me and my partner, Nizar, when we were working on that venture, this was 2 years ago, it was still very new to private investors here in the region. They've heard of Pure Harvest, but, that was it, right? Pure Harvest got some government money and this sounds like a CapEx heavy, big operation. Whereas, typically your VCs here are looking for asset light sort of business models. But yeah, I think things will change, I think things will definitely change. And there are some pioneers leading that front in terms of getting private money.
What's your prediction for the next 5-10 years in the space? Where do you see the space trending towards?
Well, definitely more vertical farms here in the UAE,
okay.
That's for sure.
Okay.
There's so much focus on that space, right? In the agri space in general, particularly with the UAE. I'm not very privy to the entire region, but in the UAE, there's a major push towards food security, towards sustainability, food wastage, net zero, etc. There's a ton of investment happening by the government and semi-government entities, right? In investing in either space for people to come in and bring their technology and start operating a vertical farm, or even themselves investing in vertical farms.
A quick question here before we jump on. Is the taste the same as when you're doing traditional farming season by season?
Look, I think I'm the wrong guy to ask because I can't taste or smell that well, according to my wife. So I don't think I'm the right guy to ask.
Okay.
Some people claim so, and others claim not.
And honestly, and why I'm asking is because I live in the States, and we have watermelon all around the season. In Lebanon, we used to have watermelon just in the summer. And up until now, I could say that watermelon in the summer just tastes much better than watermelon all around the year. And I'm like, okay, I do assume that this is vertical farming or a form of vertical farming in a way, or like controlled farming that they're doing to have watermelon around the year. Not really.
No. It's not. So what you're talking about is this is seasonality of the fruits and vegetables sort of market, and very spot on, right? When you're eating something in season, it tastes so much better than when it's off season, right?
Right.
And it could be due to two main things. One, it could be that you know there are still some remnants of that season that can still grow, but just it's not in season, so it's not getting the exact sort of nutrients, sunlight, etc. For it to grow optimally and become a juicy, fruity watermelon, right? That could be
Okay.
one. Two, it could be that they started importing because it's not in season. In another country, it could be in season, so they started importing from that country, and that country just doesn't do watermelons as good as the watermelons in the
Okay.
US or whatever.
Maybe.
Yeah. I haven't
I
heard
like
of
how.
anyone. I haven't heard of anyone growing watermelons indoor yet. I'd be surprised
Okay,
if it's happening.
it hasn't happened yet. Okay. Oh, then let's hope it happens soon. Like I'm really fascinated about the space, and I think a lot could happen in there. So I'm really interested to hear. And you're in there, so I'm really interested to hear. We spoke about the general picture. I wanna dive deeper into you and then Right Farm. You worked at Kareem. You had an e-commerce startup. Let's take that. I'm interested really in your area and Kareem. And every person I've interviewed that works at Kareem, I've interviewed Rad Abu Jawdi. He's a partner at MEVP.
Yeah.
I've interviewed a couple of people that really worked at Kareem, and I'm really interested. What made it a unicorn? Like when you worked there, what were signs? How was the environment that made it into a unicorn?
Uh, I know it may sound very sort of basic, but
Okay.
to me, that's what it is. It's two things: the vision and the culture.
Okay.
So, and obviously, the vision came from the founders, and I truly believe so. I think Kareem's vision was to simplify the lives of. Oh man, I should know this, but forgive me that I don't have it memorized. But it was something in lines with simplifying the lives of people in the region, whatever
Okay.
the case may be, right?
Okay.
And you could really feel that Mudassir and them really believed in that vision and really wanted to make a difference, right? And then the culture that they sort of built at Kareem was shocking to me when I first joined, right? There's absolute trust, there's absolute transparency. Everyone is sort of aligned with the values, with the mission, with the vision of the company, and they were able to attract amazing talent because of that, right? So I think that was the main reason, right? And obviously, the type of people that were working there and the caliber of the people was something else, right? They're pioneers here in the region, and sort of showing you what can happen if good people come together, good smart people come together and try to build something at a global scale.
What skills did you like? How did your journey at Kareem help you grow? And like, what skills did you get out of this journey or out of this part of your life?
There are so many lessons learned. Again, I was so prior to Kareem, I was working with PwC and then AstraZeneca, and those are big, giant, massive companies with
Okay.
processes in place, and everything is done by the book. They've been around for so long, and it was nice to sort of come into Kareem and see how everyone is trying to organize the chaos that was going on, right? Because AstraZeneca and PwC, no matter how big or how profitable they are, they can never grow at the rate that Kareem was
Right.
growing, right? And with that growth, you have a ton of issues that pile up as you're growing. So I think being comfortable with the chaos and understanding that, this is part of the entrepreneurial mindset. You have a lack of resources, and you have many problems, and you need to fix those problems with a handicap, being that lack of resources, right? So it kind of opens your mind to things that you would otherwise not think of if you were at an AstraZeneca or at a PwC. It's just a totally different mindset and a totally different experience.
And I think that
was cool.
And that's a lesson what you just said for founders, or someone who wants to get in the startup world. Try going the corporate route, because you learn a lot about how big companies function, and then find the right startup you want to join, and you learn really how startups function, and then go and start your own venture. I think you'll get enough experience to know what it feels like to start your own venture from being a startup and then going into a corporate like.
Yeah, I agree. It's a nice way. I never thought of it this way, but yeah. Even from a career perspective, it makes sense to start off with understanding how the business world is, right? And sort of building a foundation for yourself. So for example, I'll take my example, right? Not saying that this is the path or this is just what I see from my sort of journey. Started off with consulting, so got very solid on how business models operate, how strategic objectives and plans are set, how operational improvement processes or projects happen, how digital transformation projects happen. And then what I thought to myself was, great, I've done a bit of consulting. I don't think I'm going that far into it to become a partner. So let me go and do my MBA and figure things out, right? So I went and did my MBA. Then during the MBA, I thought, okay, if I were to think myself as sort of a canvas, and I'm trying to check things off my list from a skill set perspective, I should really build a strong analytical foundation, right, to my already limited knowledge that I learned from consulting. And that's why I took on that role at AstraZeneca. So I was doing demand planning and pricing, two fairly analytical roles, right? And so once I did that, then I thought, and then I joined Kareem on their revenue and margin management team, doing pricing work as well initially. And I thought, okay, great. So I sort of ticked that off my list, the analytical side of things. Now let me do a more external stakeholder facing role, right? So I've been interacting with all these internal stakeholders before.
Right.
And let me try to see if I can add value with external stakeholders, right? And that sort of was another checklist I wanted to tick off, right? Doing something in partnerships, BD, sales, whatever it was, just being external facing and adding value there. And then once I did that, then I was like, okay, I did the Kareem thing. What am I missing? Let me join an earlier stage startup, right? So let me get that experience under my belt. Ultimately, towards a goal. So when I joined Kareem, I thought, this is amazing. I want to start something eventually on my own, right? I want to be a founder somehow. Now, how to get there? I that's how I thought of it, right?
So you finished Kareem. After Kareem, did you go right away to start Loop?
No,
Loop Contact.
I joined I joined a startup out of LA that was launching here called Circus, experiential marketing platform. And was part of the launch team here. Unfortunately, 5 months in, the pandemic came along, so there wasn't many experiences to be marketed. Right? So that's when we thought about Loop and then started Loop.
Right. How was your start of Loop? I mean, just looking at like your thinking. You have a clear mind, and you're thinking about different problems in the market. You went from Loop Contact, which is in the eyewear space, and then you jump AgTech. So how are you thinking about problems? Like if I wanted to ask a question here, it would be, as a founder, how would you find gaps in the market to go after?
Yeah, that's an amazing question, because that's exactly what we did. So the thought process was as follows. Actually, I think this is the first time I mentioned this to anyone publicly, but before Loop, I built a dropshipping website, one product website.
Okay.
And I was selling sterilizers. You know those sterilizers that you put in a room and you have to leave the room for like 10 minutes and then it sterilizes the room, UV sterilizer.
Oh, nice.
And and we were, I mean, we were doing good numbers. This was just me and then a friend of mine. And
Okay.
it was smack, you know, when the pandemic came. So we were doing great numbers selling to the US and Canada. And then all of a sudden, Trump decides to go on TV and say, you know, you should put UV in your bloodstream and some ridiculous stuff that he was saying. I'm not sure
Yes.
how he would say those things. And then we got blocked. We got blocked from
Oh, wow.
from selling UV sterilizers. Yeah. So. I mean, I don't want to get in trouble saying this, but the website that we used for building our store and then the payment. Man, I'm a bit lost today. What do you call the
Gateway?
the sort of checkout? Yes, thank you so much.
gateway.
Man. I can't believe I forgot that. Thank you. The payment gateway provider banned us from from being able to sell that. So. You know, that got shut down, and then
When you mentioned something, you were living in the UAE, right? And you were selling drop shipping to the US, right?
Yeah.
And you know, because you know what, founders go out and think out of the box. From China, you're in a country, you're selling from China to the US. Founders go out and think out of the box. Stop thinking inside the box and I'm in Lebanon, I'm going to sell in Lebanon. I'm in Egypt, I'm going to sell in Egypt. I'm in the US, I'm going to sell in the US. No, go figure out something and think out of the box and you'll be successful. Yeah. And I really appreciate you sharing this story.
No, sure. You just reminded me. And so I was, I mean, this wasn't going to be a unicorn or anything. Right? I was just sitting at home and trying to do something on my own, right? With the very limited resources
I love that. I always tell people around me, and because I got the opportunity to live in the US and experience how's the startup ecosystem in the US, how do corporate work in the US, and I know a lot of friends in Lebanon and Lebanon is facing an economical crisis for people who don't know, and there's a lot of smart people in this country. But most of them are like, oh, we can't do anything. We're in a country that we don't have opportunities. Well, figure something out. If you're willing, you could figure something out. Start small and grow. And I think what you just mentioned in your story could show a lot of founders a way to do something when they want to do it. Finally, right farm.
No, sorry. So you asked me about. I want to answer your question because it was a very important one. On the Loop story. So, and this is something that I think is great for people that want to start something to really look at your potential customers and their pain points and how you can solve those pain points, right?
Okay.
So both me and my partner used to wear contact lenses, or he still does, I believe. And let me backtrack. Sorry, man. So we knew we wanted to do something in e-commerce, right? So that was for sure, given the pandemic, etc. Then we started thinking, what type of e-commerce model should we go with? And we thought of doing subscription, right? People are more and more used to that element of subscription, giving away your credit card, having it charged every month. People are getting used to that here in the UAE. So we thought, okay, what could be a great subscription model type of e-commerce platform? And we started thinking, what are the pain points really? Why would people want to, get something consistently without having to worry about it? And we sort of also benchmarked what worked here and what didn't, right? And a lot of the subscriptions sort of e-commerce players that did not survive in the UAE were because they were a subscription platform for a nice to have, but not really for a pain point, right? So it would be great to have I don't want to call people out or anything.
So they were
but that's
selling they were selling a commodity, like they were selling, let's say, a Nike T-shirt, but you could buy another T-shirt instead of buying a Nike T-shirt.
So let's say they're saying, hey, pay a subscription of whatever X amount of dollars a month, you'll get 3 T-shirts every month, right? Fine, great, but that's not really a pain. Buying T-shirts is not a pain point, right?
Okay.
It's not really that big of a pain point that I need to subscribe to get some T-shirts, right? Or it would be, but just not for a big market, right? So we started looking at products, right? And it sort of clicked that, hey, contact lenses, it sucks. Running out of contact lenses sucks. And here, what you had to do was either order it online and get it delivered the next day or even the day after. I'm not sure now what people are doing. Or you have to take your car, and especially in Dubai, hit the highway, go to a mall, an optician store in the mall, buy your contact lenses and come back. And typically, you probably run out on a weekday. You don't really have time to go anywhere, and you're just going to use your glasses for 2 days until your delivery comes of your for your contact lenses. So we thought, hey, this is a great product, right? We really understand the pain point because we are users experiencing that pain point. And then, this is very similar to how we did it at Right Farm. So, and then you look at the supply side, you say, okay, great. There is a value proposition here with this product for demand. Can I secure supply? And we went around and spoke to suppliers. We found that it was super lean to be able to buy contact lenses on wholesale pricing and sell it B2C pricing.
A quick question: Were you getting supply from manufactured from inside the UAE, or were you getting supply from outside of the UAE?
I'm not gonna
okay.
give you that information. But it was easy. It made sense overall, right? There's a clear value prop, clear supply angle, super lean. It just worked beautifully.
Right, and the reason I'm asking is I don't want to get the secrets of the business, but I'm in my mind I'm thinking, okay, what? Because we know China as the big manufacturer of the world. In my head, I'm like, and it's an own theory of mine. I think Egypt could be another manufacturer of the whole region, and I really believe that. So I'm thinking, like, are we capable as regional countries in the MENA region to have this manufacture capability and supply our own self without depending on faraway countries in a way?
I'm sure you are, or we are. Everyone is. I just think there are factors that we won't necessarily discuss that either give you the go ahead to do that or tell you no, you can't manufacture.
Right.
Yeah. But just on the Loop story, so we supply brand contact lenses, so we don't have our own brand. We don't source. We don't. We don't source any white label. So we do your typical IQView, Johnson & Johnson, etc.
Okay. Finally, Right Farm.
Yeah.
Again, I guess 3 questions that come after each other. What is the gap that you saw with Right Farm? How did you start Right Farm? And what is Right Farm? Sure.
So the gap we saw is what we spoke about, right? The agri supply chain is very inefficient, very messy, very traditional. And there's a gap that you can fill by being a tech player in the space and working on pain points that a lot of businesses have when it comes to the procurement of fresh produce, right? That was the gap, and we can dive into the gap in more detail because there's a lot of elements that come with this business model. We're just scratching the surface right now for what Right Farm could be. And then your second question was how did the journey start?
Yeah, how did it start? How do you get your co-founders? How did you decide, okay, I'm launching Right Farm?
Sure. So it started with a conversation. So given that I was working on that vertical farming project and we were speaking to investors to try to raise that pre-seed round, I met with the team over at ADQ, the venture studio team at ADQ at the time. and I met with Enhanced Ventures as well. And we discussed an idea for a platform that connects farms to businesses, right?
Okay.
And I had a pretty clear understanding of not only the agri landscape, but also a lot of the troubles that businesses faced in procuring fresh produce, right? And we sat down, discussed at length, and then I came back with a plan for a business model for Right Farm. We went over that plan. I pitched the plan, and we started sort of discussing how this can look. How we can set this up. And we got the ball rolling July 11th. We agreed on a pre-seed round, a few milestones to be set for that round. And the idea of that round was to establish product market fit, right? So to understand, is there a real sort of market for this platform? Started off me and Jessica, who's on the product team. Jessica joined me maybe 2 weeks in, and then I onboarded Nadeem, who was our commercial director, and then Ahmed, our supply director. We launched in 100 days, and the rest is history. And essentially, what we're focusing on right now is being the go-to B2B e-commerce platform for food service businesses and any other business for that matter, but with a particular focus on food service, to secure fresh or to procure fresh produce in a smarter, simpler, and more sustainable way. Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to ask this question, but something that I really noticed is you're one of the startups that I speak to that you went with your idea kind of to the venture capitalist, spoke about it with them, agreed with them on the idea, got the funding, and then launched. Is that kind of true?
I mean, given that they're a venture studio,
right.
They had
this is how their model works. Right.
Yeah, and they had a big role in the idea, right? So the idea effectively came from them, not from me. The idea of a platform connecting farms to business buyers was their idea, not mine. The way we went about it, the way we strategized on the business model, and how we sort of played it out was, I guess, an idea that I pitched to them. But yeah, not to be mistaken, it was their idea to do something to build a platform connecting supply and demand. Their idea, not
right. And you working on a vertical farming startup helped you get, a more easy deal with them. You can't be just a regular person, show up to them, be like, oh, I have an idea. You have to show proof of what you've been doing to be able to get a deal with the venture studio in a way.
Sure, I think that's what attracted them to me, right?
Right. Yeah.
It's the fact that I'm passionate about the space, and I've been working on that project for a year and a half, so they knew I had a lot of insight in the space, right?
Okay. I'm going to take Right Farm and kind of tear it apart and digest it, because Right Farm is a little bit a bunch of, like, you have data analytics, you have a logistic part, you have the supply chain part. It's a bunch of stuff. On your website, give me 1 second just to get the right quote. When I go to your website, I guess what you're doing is you're having deal with farmers where you're getting the fresh produce. You're having deals with restaurants where you're supplying them with the fresh produce whenever they need it. But there's a technology part in the middle, the data part or the analytic part. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, sure. So we're an e-commerce platform, right? So right now we procure fresh produce from farms and we deliver them to food service businesses. When I say the agri supply chain is traditional or inefficient or messy or requires digitization, it's because a lot of things, let me rephrase.
And if my question gets easier, what data do you give the farmers to help them out, and what data do you give the restaurants to help them out, and able to combine them and to help them use your farm?
Yeah. No, absolutely. I totally follow the question. I'm just trying to phrase it in a proper way. We're an e-commerce platform, right? And so essentially what that makes us, if you remove the e-commerce word out of the equation, is a food distributor, right?
Okay.
To put it in very basic terms. And food distribution is part of that agri-supply chain, and it's done in a very traditional way, right? What I mean by that is you have people that are sitting down with a pen and paper, buying and selling fruits and vegetables. You have others that are sitting behind the desk with an Excel file. You have others that have an ERP system, right? Like your Barakat or your Kipsen, right, etc. But there is no real innovation or let me put it this way. The biggest distributor in the UAE does not have data scientists on their team, does not have engineers that are building something other than an app, right? Front-end app. And that's exactly what this industry is lacking, right?
Okay.
And now when you start doing that to optimize internally, it's almost natural for you to extend that, either that tech or that data, to both sides of your network, whether it's the supply or the demand side, right? So essentially you would do it for yourself, right? But naturally you would start also offering it as a service, or even offering that data as free or whatever. You don't have to monetize it, right? Because essentially you're still optimizing internally, right?
Right.
And so the type of tech or things that we work on at Right Farm that's completely different are things like a pricing engine, demand planning engine, integration modules, how we can integrate with Kitopi, who's a customer of ours, who's using a massive ERP and Microsoft Dynamics to manage their entire operation, right?
Right.
How we can integrate with a partner, with a food tech partner. So yeah, those are the things the tech team is working on. There are a lot of sort of modules that we use that are not that we don't necessarily need to build ourselves. There's plenty of top class modules and software out there that we could integrate with, but there are some core tech modules that we are building internally, and that is sort of IP for Right Farm.
So in a way, you're helping farmers. So because you have this connection with restaurants, and restaurants are going to your website or your app to let's say, I need 50 tons of tomato, 50 tons of onions, 30 tons of that. You have that on your website. You could tell farmers, this is what we're expecting for next month. So farmers could get ready and do this produce for the next month. So you could get it and supply it back to the restaurants.
Absolutely. So yeah, that's an element, right? So you're talking about sharing your demand planning forecast with your farm,
right,
maybe contracting with those farms. Yeah, absolutely. That could be an element, right? It could be that we say, hey, Ahmed's farm, we know you grow mangoes, and we have this type of demand for mangoes. But then when it's not mango season for you, how about you grow strawberries? This is what our demand looks like, right?
Okay.
And we can work on contract farming. So I say, hey, Right Farm will
buy this amount of
contract with you for
you.
Exactly.
Okay. We spoke about that. A question I have: where are the farms you work with, and where are the restaurants you work with? Because that brings me to my second question, which is logistics. Like, are you working with farms and restaurants only in the GCC? Are you working with outside of the GCC and the GCC? And then I'll jump into logistics.
Sure. So for local produce, we buy from local farms. They could be in Dubai, in the Northern Emirates, Al Ain, Abu Dhabi, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
Some of them deliver to our warehouse. Others we go and pick up. It depends. If they have that logistics capability, then great. If not, then we go and pick up. And we've started recently importing from farms in Egypt and the Netherlands and Turkey soon as well.
Okay.
So anything
Wow.
anything local, we procure from a local farm. Anything imported, if we're at that threshold at the SKU level where we can import at least a container, then we go out and we find farms in the region or even globally.
I guess let's wrap up with the 2-3 questions because I know. How are you dealing with logistics? Like, how does are you doing the logistics yourself as a right farm, or are you dealing with different contractors or different startups that are doing that? And if you could answer this first.
Yeah, of course. So we contract with a third-party logistics provider,
Okay.
and that's how we're doing it. But we always look at it from a cost perspective, right? So what's our logistics cost as a percentage of revenue, right? And we have sort of
Right.
an objective on that there. We're exploring different types of models when it comes to logistics. But for the time being, we're still working with our 3PL on renting their cold store vans.
Okay. What, as a general and right farm, what bottlenecks are you seeing in the system? Like what problems in the whole operations of right farm? And I'm asking this because I know a lot of founders are hearing this. So I want them to understand as a startup, what bottlenecks will they see in the future or when they're working in their startup?
You're putting me on the spot here. Look, we're an operational, we're an operations heavy business, right? So
if it makes it easier in your last year since you launched, what's 2 problems you faced that you really needed a solution to find?
yeah, I can actually give you one very good problem that startups can run into, right? Which is you're if especially if you're an operational business, right? Like we are, you just need to be very careful when you're growing that quickly and that exponentially to make sure that or not only the bottlenecks, but the issues that come up operationally are being tackled to enable your operation to handle that type of growth, right?
Okay.
Because a lot of times people go after the revenue and the money and sort of forget that, hey, we have an operations team and a warehouse. Can they handle this type of growth?
Right.
What do they need for them to help us achieve that growth, etc. And that's something I wouldn't say we run into, but that's always in the back of our mind, right? Okay, this month's target is to sell X. First thing we do is, hey, Ahmed and supply team, can the warehouse handle? This means that we need to deliver 300 orders a day. Can you guys handle that? Do you need more space? What do we need to do to help you guys help us achieve those numbers, right?
I love the story and I could relate. I worked as a salesman for a company that sells oil for roads, for emulsion. And we as salesmen could go out there and sell all the tons you could imagine in the world. We could go out and put 500,000 tons on the book. And then we go back to operations and we're like, could you manufacture 500,000 tons? And they're like, no way we could do it. This is what our capabilities is. This is what you could sell. If we want to do 500,000 tons, this is what we need. We need a bigger plant. We need more people. We need this. We need that. So
absolutely,
you could go out and sell whatever you want, but could you deliver on what you're selling? So I could relate to this story.
Absolutely, yeah. That's a good example.
Eli, you've been in the space. You've worked in you've spoke with different people. You're working in it day to day. What are 3 problems you would tell founders? This is what's missing in the space. Go out and build a startup around it.
Can you rephrase that question just for me to make sure I understood?
So basically, what startups do you see could be built in the industry?
In the industry we're in, right?
Yeah, in the ag tech industry.
Yeah. That's a great question, man. I'm a big fan, but again, I'm biased, so this is not advice. This is not. I don't even know if this is a viable business model or don't quote me on all of this, but it's just from a bias perspective and from what I've seen. I really admire and appreciate startups that are working on solving problems for farmers, right? It's not something we do now. I mean, directly. So we do offer them a new sales channel, but that's about it for now. I think we'd like to get into that later. And if you look at what the likes of NinjaCart and others have been acquiring lately, it's exactly those types of startups, the startups that are solving problems for the farming side or the supply side. And I think that's a big. I mean, it's very tough, right? You're dealing with farmers who are not necessarily tech savvy, who don't really understand maybe business that well, and you're trying to help them out and enable them with some type of tech that'll improve their lives and improve their production and yield and sort of their income. So it's not an easy thing. It's probably the hardest thing to do in this space, but it's much needed. And there are people that work on this in Egypt and a bunch of other places in Morocco. And yeah, it's a big gap, right? Again, going back to the tech enablement and the data, that's where the real big gap is.
Right.
Yeah, but don't quote
this
me
is something. No, and I kind of agree with you. Is we need a lot of software inside the industry, inside the ag tech industry. We need a lot of software to help farmers or to help people who are buying it. But what founders should be careful about is just like fintech, how fintech started in the reason it was really new, people used cash all the time. They needed a lot of education on how to use fintech solutions. Same thing goes back to farmers. Any startup that's coming in the space, go do a bunch of education, show the farmers, sit down with them, teach them how to use your software, and work on a good software that helps them, because it's a huge market out there that's still untapped.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
This is a question I always like to end my episodes with, or two questions here really quick. If you weren't working on Right Farm, what would you be building?
A vertical farm.
Okay. Last question. Who are two founders in the region? If you were an investor, if you were a venture studio, and the founder comes up to you and you want to bet your money on, who are these two founders or two startups?
By name?
Yes.
Wow, that's a cool question. No brainer, Mudassir Sheikha from Kareem. I would give him all my money. Doesn't matter. I don't care if there's no business, there's no pitch deck or anything. I would still just give him money.
And now I want a founder that's starting, right? I don't want someone who already had a name. I want someone that's, under the hood and going up that you know about and you want to invest in.
Who's... Man, that's a good question. You should have sent me this before.
I have it.
Did you send it to me? I'm sorry.
Yes, I did.
I missed it. Okay. I'm sorry. My bad.
You're all good.
Oof. Okay, let me find you a quick answer for this. Who's doing something interesting right now? I know nothing about crypto, so I wouldn't say anything in crypto because I'm absolutely oblivious. Someone in fintech.
Or e-commerce or any industry. I mean,
yeah. I'm just trying to think. It's not that there's a lack. To be honest, I've been very sort of zoned in on my space, so I really have not a very big picture of what's going on. If I was, sorry.
I was going to say I have a better deal. I'll save you answering this question, and I'll have a second episode with you in the next 6 months. And by that time, you'd think of another name and you'll answer it. It's totally fine.
That sounds good. Or you can give me multiple choice answers and I can choose one. But no, to be fair, our co-founder Mazin, our COO and co-founder, he was working on something before Right Farm, and I would definitely give him money to pursue that.
Okay. Eli, thank you so much for the great
disclaimer. I have no money to invest. Right? So.
Ili, it was a great episode, Anjad. To be honest, the first couple of episodes I had were all in the fintech space and e-commerce space. So you coming from the agtech space is something new I really wanted to learn about, and I want my listeners to learn about. It's an interesting space, and you're solving a problem, a real problem for a lot of people. Food supply, getting food to the right people, helping farmers sell their products. It's amazing. How could people reach you? Are you hiring at Right Farm? If people want to follow what you're doing at Right Farm, how could they get to you?
Sure. Thank you, Ahmed. I appreciate the kind words. We're on all social media, I believe. So on LinkedIn, Right-Farm, on Instagram, Right Farm UAE, on Twitter, the same, and I'm on LinkedIn as well. You can reach out to me anywhere, and if you want to email us, it's hello@rightfarm.com.
Sounds great. Thank you, Elif, another time for being here. I really appreciate it.
You too, Ahmed. Thank you, and